So when you listen to professional development gurus talk about setting goals for your life and they talk about why it's important, why you should write them down, get it very clear in your mind. And I agree with all of that stuff. I'm not disagreeing with it. However, they leave some stuff out. And that is because politics or life in politics is a little more nuanced than just going after a specific job and hanging on to it as long as you can. Although, there's an element of that. But the tapestry of political life is so large and wide that when you first enter it as a passion, so you might say, well, I'm going to get into politics because I'm a political junkie. Aren't we all? Right? So that's why we're all in it eventually. We monetized our passion, and that's a smart thing to do. The thing is that from the public's perspective, until you're inside it, you don't really realize what a big net is cast in the political world. And so your first thing is, well, I'm going to run for office because that's what you do if you're in politics, forgetting that there's other things that you could do. So I don't ever want you to be discouraged to say, well, I might never win an election, because it doesn't matter even if you don't. That's when you chase things like cushy appointments, or an ambassadorship. Well, there's another appointment, but, becoming an ambassador, you could be a, financial advisor, for example, so you can help fundraise for whatever party you're a fan of. You could get involved at the EDA level, and that's very important because you're literally choosing who the candidates become at that level. We're going to do a whole class on EDAs and why they're important and why you should be in one. But anyway, so all these other things you can do. You could be a strategist like I am, a media person, and then also when you're planning your goals, it's not just the title. Like sometimes we think in terms of our ego to say, well, I would feel really good if my title was this and I was at this income bracket. And maybe you're altruistic too, to say, I want to live very, very well, but making a difference. And public service is that. I know that we live in a climate where politicians are treated with a lot of disdain and a lot of suspicion. And there's a lot of cynicism around politics. And you know what? The press does that because they're desperate for clicks, okay? But the reality is that public service isn't easy. So when you're doing that, you are truly doing a good thing. And that is how we're going to treat politics in our conversation, which obviously is not going to be difficult, or you wouldn't be taking this course in the first place. Unless you're a predator, you wouldn't be wanting this job. So you're either really altruistic and you want to give it your all, or you're a predator. It's one of the two. I've worked happily with both. So in any case, I find that, by the way, something that's worth pondering, that the two extremes of humanity are drawn to the political arena as a career. That's a very curious observation I've thought a lot about. And you will often, have to put your integrity to the face of that choice. So for those of you that are religious or spiritual, and maybe what has held you back is because you feel like, well, I should be, focusing on my faith and not in the accolades of winning an election or getting into politics. But truly, if you want a spiritual or religious exercise, have your 40 days in the desert in politics. You'll be challenged at every single end. And when you want to talk about cultivating wisdom and discernment, you will need both to make the life and death decisions that are never easy to make, because there are many, many times that the decisions that you make will come at a huge personal cost to hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of people. And sometimes the decisions you make in good faith that you truly believe are the best decisions turn out to have, an unexpected negative impact that you have to publicly deal with. Most of us, when we make mistakes, we make them in private. As a politician, you don't often have that cover, right? And sometimes you are dragged out and humiliated, and sometimes you're innocent when that happens and you're thrown under the bus. Sometimes you're asked to jump on the grenade, apologize for the quote, in order to protect the party. And that's never fun when you're asked to be, a scapegoat, but it happens all the time. Look at the Honorable Mr. Hong. That is a Liberal MP that was just basically insinuated that he was, part of the foreign interference scandal that's happening in Canada right now. Let's say that those allegations are true, maybe not even of him, but of somebody else, right? Imagine how that person felt when they were in a position to win an election maybe they wouldn't win, and there's some dark horse behind you willing to give you a little push. Is your integrity big enough to lose an election in order to do the right thing? It's really easy to judge the ones in it, but in the moment, sometimes the way it's presented doesn't seem like you're doing something sinister. It's not until after when you look at things and say, oh, gee, I got tricked there, or I didn't even realize I was being used. And now you're not only a chump, but a villain. Not a fun time. And there's not a lot of jobs that put you in that position. Some people might say, well, all celebrities face that. No, do they? Do they though? Maybe a entertainer might get laughed at, or a athlete, not get signed during the next whatever. But a politician's villainized. Your integrity is in question, right? You're pulled in front of parliamentary committees. It's hard. And what happens when you have to make a decision where people might die? And then you're going to say, well, I would never make that decision. But if you don't, many more people might die. Governing is hard. And it's not only hard on that big, high level of these big life and death decisions, because that doesn't happen every day, right? But the day-to-day drudgery does happen. So, for example, I remember one public figure or one politician saying to me once, what surprises me most about life and politics? It's not the Shark Tank stuff, because that's actually, I've been able to stay under the radar and avoid all that stuff. And, it's not the traveling, it's not the stress, whatever. It's the amount of reading I need to do. I was not prepared for the amount of reading. And when am I supposed to do this? Because I've got to travel, I have to attend all these things, I have to answer the phone, I have to do my job. So when am I supposed to read all this stuff and then, get educated to be able to make the decisions in regards to the stuff I'm reading about, So it's just the actual life of it, the day-to-day, what time do you have to wake up in the morning? I know politicians that have made decisions whether they're going to go into federal or provincial politics, not based on whether they really care more about federal issues or not, but because they don't want to have to go to Ottawa half the week. They don't want to have to go back and forth. So if they're near Toronto, it's better for them to run provincially if they're in Ontario, because they can go home every night and be with their kids. So remember that as much as it's great the day you might win and all the impact that you can have or whatever, understand that comes at the cost of your day-to-day life. So, if you are already married, take a look at your spouse right now and tell me, is this person at the level to serve? Because this is, a partnership deal. If you want the marriage to last, it is anyway. Otherwise, your partner becomes Casper, the friendly spouse that nobody ever sees, the snuffleupagus spouse. And that usually doesn't bode well for marriages. And if you're not married, well, now that changes the dating game, doesn't it? Because you're not just looking for who might make a good mom to your kids, who's going to want to live through this with me. And more than that, who's going to want to do it with me? Because if you're not partnered, believe me when I tell you, being a power couple's a lot of fun. Not everybody's up to that. So choose accordingly. What about your kids? Have you raised them to be ready for this? So when the press decide to pounce on your kid's stupid haircut, is your kid going to handle it? Are you going to handle it? Do you have to get up early and stay late a lot? Do you need to travel a lot for this job? Are you a homebody introvert? I am. I'm a homebody introvert. I don't mind traveling once in a while. I remember, I'll give you an example of the pivots you make. So I became a campaign manager and loved it. So I decided to get some extra training and see if I can't do this more. And and in the training, a slide of a Super 8 motel showed up. And everybody starts laughing. The insiders, the more senior people, started laughing. And somebody said, "What's so funny?" And they said, "Oh, anybody that works for the party knows Super 8 really well. Anytime we have to get parachuted in to help a campaign or wherever, that's where we have to stay." I quit campaign management that second. That second. I'm not a Super 8 kind of girl, right? No way. I'm a nice hotel type of girl. I want breakfast in bed the next morning type of girl. Hot breakfast, not this continental grab a bag stuff. So I quit that second. So you have to remember that you love politics, you can be in politics. It's a big tent. It's a big, big, big tent. So the trick to being, it's not just successful, it's happy. Because that's hard to be in this Shark Tank. Because there's a lot of stuff in politics that's not the most fun to live through. And I'm going to help you prepare for all of it. But knowing that it's a tough gig, knowing that you have to go through a lot of stuff, it's better, and regardless of what you do in politics, it's not just public officials. Life in politics is all-consuming. So knowing this, isn't it better that the little space you carve out for yourself under that tent is a space that makes you happy? So when you're setting your goal, think of how much you want to make, sure, and think of what a nice title might be. But remember, there's a lot of titles that you don't know exist yet. And there's a lot of different lifestyles that you don't know is available to you. So you're going to want to learn about that a little bit and, walk through those paths a little bit so you can decide that, hey, as much as I thought I liked this, this really isn't that much fun. But what I really enjoy is that. So let me go do more of that and see what career path could be available for me on that end. And then expose yourself to that world and make it happen. And then that's when you can do your real goal setting. And what I like to tell my clients is, I want you to skip 5 years ahead. If everything works out the way you want it to, tell me what 5 years from now looks like. And now start working your way backwards. What did you have to do from that point that you wanted to get to back to today to make that happen? And let's look for your weak spots. What don't you have? Maybe you don't have money. Maybe you don't have the name recognition. Maybe you don't have the confidence. Maybe I would be so great. I have these great ideas, but God, I'm scared to speak in public. I suck at public speaking. Maybe there's a glitch that you think is so horrible you'll never get over it, or you hate to do it. Maybe you think you hate to do it just because you're not good at it. Who wants to do stuff they're not good at? And you think that you're fated to always suck at it, but you don't know that the hidden genius just hasn't been unlocked, and you can learn a skill. You can learn to become good at something, and then because you're good at it, you love doing it, the thing you thought you hated once. So now's the time to find out what all of that is, because you have to get polished, right? We're making a diamond out of you, and Only pressure is going to do that. You know, back in the day when somebody wanted to join religious life, they would go to the spiritual director of a church, say, I want to become a nun or a priest. And they would automatically be rejected. And then you have to go back. And then they'd say, becoming a nun is not just getting an outfit and, whatever. Show me that you want to live that life, and then we'll see. So for a year, they want to see you go to church every morning. They want to see you never miss a mass and contribute to the church and volunteer and get involved. And then they put you in an official discernment program. They want to demystify it. They want you to understand exactly what you're walking into. They don't sugarcoat a thing because they need you to be sure. Before they really invest in you, they need you to be sure, because that's a promise for life. Don't think that life in politics isn't a lot like that. You're in public service, after all. You're owned by your public. You're supported by your party. They give you the platform. Then you might say, well, I might run as an independent. That's its own class. That gets its own class. But if you're going the advised traditional route of party politics, you got to get yourself into that tent. And that doesn't happen by, getting discovered at a mall like the next supermodel used to be. You've got to earn your way to that spot, knowing that there's other people that want that same spot. So when you're making the plans, understand that your life will be consumed by this job. You might get some weekends, but weekends aren't yours by default. You might luck out once in a while, but you don't just, I have to prioritize my time. No, you don't get that liberty, especially during an election cycle. The job will own you. It will own your family. It will impact everything you do. It will impact your businesses if you have them, if you're smart in a good way. If not, it could hurt you. There's a lot to consider about life and politics. The thing is that once you get the demystification out of the way, which is what we're going to do next. Next, I'm going to try and talk you out of it, okay? That's the next class. But once we get that out of the way, then you know that this is what you want. And you're ready for the sacrifices that are required. And you'll have a strategy, more importantly, the knowledge behind that strategy of what you need to fix, what you need to do, and how you need to shape your lifestyle in order to succeed at swimming among sharks that never sleep. I'm going to keep going back to that reference because, believe me, that's what it feels like. But like I said, it's only problematic if you're not a shark. But that has to be cultivated in you. Because the problem is you get into politics with the ideals of what you're going to be able to do for people. And you will be able to do a lot, don't get me wrong. It's a very important job. Doesn't matter what role you play, you're helping maintain the safety and stability of an entire nation and every nation that's influenced by it. It's a big deal. If you're serving democracy truly, bravo to you. But it is all consuming, it is a sacrifice, and you need to be ready. And that's my job.